Hello and welcome to Thinkermaker, a savvy self-production. In this podcast we explore the foolishness behind a word that politicians and experts just can't stop saying. The word growth. Do feel free to pause to read the slides any time. Growth is today's buzzword. It sounds positive, useful for politicians' soundbites. Here it is, right at the centre of a G20 summit strapline. And here you see that word on a London tube train ad for Heathrow Airport. And here it is in a BBC media headline, "The growth concept is an obsession." But grow what? What does it really mean? Clearly, planet Earth is not physically expanding, so what's getting bigger? Okay, we kind of know it's about juggling the money go round, so value is passing around everyone in society. But still, does growth mean your salary will rise or prices will be high or low? Which is better? Does this growth make society more balanced? People don't know what experts mean by growth, even politicians. So let's take a look. It's all about the growth of something called Gross Domestic Product, or GDP for short. Expert economists use GDP as a measure of national welfare with this fancy formula to calculate it. The C is public consumer spending. That's you and me in the shops and online. The G is government spending on public needs like roads, schools. The I is spending by investors on business startups, and the NX is the net value of exports and imports. Experts say a nation's trade should keep going up. That's what growth refers to. Supposedly this improves welfare, and experts obsess over it. They virtually worship it. And because experts worship this number, politicians, bankers and the media also obsess over it. This is Professor Miles, a leading economist who advised the Bank of England, and his book on the wealth of nations explains GDP does not directly measure welfare, but uses a dodgy shortcut. He admits it has many problems. Let's look at those. Take cigarettes. They can provide a moment of pleasure, but that's not welfare. We know smoking kills health. But still, money spent on cigarettes is counted towards GDP. Why? Well, here's the logic. To calculate GDP as a measure of welfare, follow these 6 logical steps. Step 1 assumes a person only buys things which benefit them. A person won't spend on anything which reduces their happiness and welfare. Step 2 follows that the more a person spends, the more that person's welfare and happiness increases. Step 3 follows that the way to measure a person's happiness and welfare is to count how much money they spent in total. Step 4 says the more money a whole country is spending, the happier everyone is. Step 5 follows that if a country buys more stuff year after year, then the welfare of its people is increasing. And step 6 concludes that all the stuff we buy equals all the stuff sold, so we should count welfare as the total price of everything sold, and this is called the productive output. This is the logic that equates welfare with selling as much stuff as possible. How simple, but how wrong. Clearly a foolish logic. The calculation counts cigarette sales, but doesn't subtract for lost welfare of ill health caused by the smoking, but then healthcare spending to restore health is counted. Now look, taking away welfare and then giving it back is not growth, is it? Look at the formula. It's got no minus signs to subtract costs which spoil welfare, like lost health or pollution. Whereas lost welfare due to pollution is ignored, the clean-up costs for it are added as government spending. Again, to simply restore lost welfare is not growth of welfare. Losses of welfare should be subtracted, but GDP does not subtract. GDP also ignores welfare arising from productivity in a loving home. GDP ignores the black market, but it does count government spending on clean-up costs of terrorism as a positive. The folly continues. Many soft human values hugely contribute to welfare but can't be directly measured. Compassion, trust, dignity, culture, loyalty. So they're outside the money system and excluded by GDP. This list of the 20 happiest countries shows that GDP, the blue area, accounts for barely a fifth of national welfare. Those soft, unmeasurable, non-financial factors ignored by GDP make up 80% of welfare. Also, successful business people say it's foolish to brag about gross income without subtracting costs. They keep an eye on gains and costs. But guess what? GDP totally ignores costs. This endless quest to grow GDP is now a beauty contest of nations. The UK is fifth biggest GDP, but that's not true welfare. Britain's not even in the top 20 happy country list. Something went wrong. GDP experts missed this soft stuff. The result? Brexit. What's the lesson? Don't let experts' GDP forecasts lead the way. Clearly, GDP is a poor guide to welfare, but experts make it worse by advising welfare improves if we spend more year after year. Really? Look, in farming, historically, it was natural to take stock of harvest every summer, once each year, once each time the earth goes around the sun. But must we all buy a new car, a new phone, new shoes every time the earth goes around the sun? Every year, more and more mindless spending? How silly! Experts call that growth. Nonsense. That's not welfare. More is not always better. Have we forgotten the word enough? Don't humans ever get satisfied? Expert theories say no. Not to mention the overworked squeeze we put on our planet to produce more and more every year endlessly, all for the idea of GDP growth. That's not the way to pursue a nation's welfare. Even the professor's book admits it can make people deeply unhappy. And remember, experts totally failed to predict the 2007 global crisis, the largest in 100 years. Even the FT noted experts' inability to foresee that and their continued use of broken methods. More recently, Bank of England experts admitted getting it wrong on Brexit, but remain addicted to GDP growth as the guide. We can't go along with that. Politicians and the media must stop giving them priestly status. This article speaks wisdom. GDP must be abandoned. To achieve true welfare, we should stop growing a number that's not actually measuring welfare. So why do our leaders allow GDP to guide their decisions? Well, to win our votes. They think they must claim to be best for improving welfare, and they know everyone blindly follows expert advice to grow GDP. Are you part of the problem? If you think the economy mainly in terms of GDP growth, then you are. This makes politicians deprioritise those soft values which account for 80% of welfare. Thankfully, some leaders have started new welfare measures such as general well-being, GWB. This includes how safe it is for a person to walk outside at night. Well, how about that? Thank you for watching.